Good morning, everyone, and good evening and good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. This is our 12th community conversation, and this one is a little bit different to our usual ones because this is actually going to be part of the Asia-Pacific Dialogue platform. We're trialling a new hybrid format this year, in which we had a 3-day meeting in Kathmandu a couple of weeks ago, and we're going to be talking about that today, reflecting on some of the things that was discussed, some of the highlights from people who were there. But we're also going to be running a series of online sessions as well. We've had one already run by OpenStreetMap that took place last week, and more are to be announced in the coming weeks. So yeah, please do watch this space and watch the hub, and we will be announcing those as and when they're finalized. So just for those that weren't in Kathmandu, just to recap, it was 3 days. It was very successful. We were hosted by the NDRRMA, which is the National Disaster Risk Management Authority in Nepal, and also by the Nepalese Red Cross Society. And we had, let me just check, 212 people were in attendance from 24 countries, and we also had 20 support staff. So the total number of participants was 232. So it was a big group. Some of those people are here today in the call to share their reflections. Some of those people are in the audience who will also have a chance to share their reflections. And some people are joining the Asia-Pacific Dialogue platform for the first time today. So what we're going to do, we're going to run through some questions with some of the audience, some of the panelists to start with, and then we're going to turn to the audience who have joined us today. We've put the questions in the chat, so have a think about those. And once we finish with the panelists giving their reflections, there'll be plenty of time for everyone else to have their say on the things that they found interesting, if they were in Kathmandu, or the things they think were missing from the discussions. We're open to all kinds of feedback, of course. And also, if you weren't there, then something that you might want to share, something that's been happening in the anticipatory action sector in your part of Asia Pacific that you would like to share. There's a chance for that as well. So what I would like to do is turn over to our first panelist, and that is Inyoung Yang from the Food and Agriculture Organization, who I think I saw in a room with Raymond. So Inyoung, please go ahead. And the question is, what was your main highlight or outcome from the 3-day meeting that we had in Kathmandu? And as a secondary question, something that you found interesting or something you learned from the parallel sessions that took place across the 3 days?
Right. I think one of the sessions that was very interesting and memorable for me was the unpacking technical standards session. Not because I was moderating the session, but yeah, it was really nice to sort of work on the exercise that we developed based on the regional technical standards that was developed last year through a series of consultations with the Asia Pacific Technical Working Group on Anticipatory Action. And we sort of, my co-moderator Damon and I put together 15, 16 cards based on the technical standards, and we sort of divided into groups and played with that with the participants and see how these technical standards are relevant and how it can be updated and how it can be used at the country level as well. And I think that some of the participants from the sessions, I think in the audience here in the online session today as well, but we realized, yeah, some elements can be updated, for instance, like, you know, government engagement section or community engagement section or funding side as well, dividing that into process funding and activation funding instead of just merging into one funding as standards. Yeah, those sort of very productive conversation has come out of it. And yeah, we'll be working on updating the technical standards based on the feedback that we gathered from that session as well. So yeah, that was definitely a highlight for me. And another one, another one that I presented, but the plenary session on the regional mapping exercise and also the roadmap session as well. I think I'm remembering those sessions that are very engaging and that I could hear from the participants on how we can sort of move forward and sort of the action points come out of it, if that makes sense. So the regional mapping exercise, as you might know, it was conducted in across the region in 13 countries plus the Pacific over the past few months, and we were presenting the results in different areas, trigger, AA, financing, evidence, and institutionalization. And it was very interesting, I think, for everyone to see where the gaps are, where sort of the needs are, where sort of the technical working group at the regional level can support with this filling the gaps, and and then based on that, developing the roadmap. Sort of the discussion was interesting as well. And I think that in the coming weeks at the regional level, technical working group will work on the development of roadmap. So yeah, stay tuned for that. But yeah, that's all from my side. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much, Inyoung. And yeah, I'm very interested to know what is on the plates on your table. Whether it's watermelon or raw steak, I can't quite tell. But yeah, it looks delicious either way. Great, thank you. And so the next person that I'd like to ask to share some reflections from the 3 days is Verena, who works with me at the German Red Cross. So yeah, please, over to you, Verena.
Thank you, Tim. Yes, so my name is Verena. I work with the German Red Cross in headquarters in Germany, but I actually work a lot with our Asian delegates. So that's also why I'm joined the Asia-Pacific Dialogue platform. And for me, it was very nice to see that how many people were joining also for the AA for Beginner session, basically showing that our community is growing and that people who do not have yet a lot of experience are also joining us for the platform and are hopefully getting a lot out of the platform as well. A lot of inspiration and a lot of kind of what's going on and what we're actually talking about in AA. So that was very nice to see, and also connecting actually what Inyoung already said within the technical session to kind of then see, okay, what are the standards that we are doing, that we are working on, and what are the standards we ourselves want to kind of abide by. And then topic-wise, I really like we had a session on working on heat waves. Kind of seeing how we can take a heat wave in AA. And I really enjoyed the session because we had time and it was very practical to kind of get into how different countries and how different organizations implemented heat wave. And so actually kind of getting into practicalities. How, for example, there was a lot of interest in how do I set up a cooling center. We had a great example from Vietnam showing like how actually do I set up a cooling center, and what can I do, how is it done. So I really enjoyed that session because we were able to kind of go very practically into how can I do this on the ground, basically, not like high level conversation, but like how on the ground practically can I do it. And then maybe as the third point, the topic of institutionalization. And that we had governments joining and had also sessions on how governments are institutionalization, this is a hard word, is to they're basically taking AA into their government work, having examples from Pakistan who are doing it on a very local level, having examples from the Philippines who are actually currently drafting a framework, a law for having AA as part of their disaster law, basically, which is super great. And also having the example from Bangladesh, who are now working on a government nationwide early action protocol on floods and EIPs, kind of being the ones that coordinating all the organizations working on AA. So that was super interesting for me to hear, and I hope it also was inspiration for other governments and countries to go in the same direction. Yeah, that's it from my side.
Thank you, Verena. So the next person I'd like to reflect for us is Margarettha Siregar from World Vision. Margarettha, perhaps you'd like to unmute and share your own reflections.
Thank you, Tim. I hope you can hear me well. So for me, for us, the highlights will be to see the growing of the anticipatory action, especially in the government side. We can see like there are governments already starting to own the anticipatory actions, especially like Bangladesh. We can see they even start to lead the coordinations. And also we can see some of this with the Nepal governments. And this is a very good sharing to other governments. For instance, like we bring government from Sri Lanka and government from Mongolia to the meeting, to the forum, and then they are quite impressed with how advanced the other governments already lead the AA process. And also we saw that the range of thematic sessions becomes broader and becomes more diverse, which is very good. So there are thematic sessions like very technical, like in early warning, like heat waves, cash voucher assistance, into the social aspect like local context, gender equality and social inclusions. So, and even we bring the new topics like insurance and microfinance. So these are very good things for us with so much range of thematics. I think the challenge will be because the massive numbers of participants and also a very tight schedule. So that's why everything's kind of like just window shopping. For some of our participants feel like window shoppings while they want to dig more deeper for those kind of issues. We kind of like trying to influence them or endorse them to do the to do the digging into their own national forum where they can be more detailed and more contextual. Some takeaways that we can I can share from my side is it's actually now with the event that we have, it's a good time for the roadmap to intentionally combine the natural and social science, especially for the early warning, the risk impact assessments, and in the end the forecast for impact-based forecast. Because right now we are still having some challenge in the impact-based forecast. So it's good to now intentionally bring the two sciences together, how to really map the social impact as well as natural impact into the forecast. The other one that it's actually a coincidence that I also went to the Santiago network. And amazingly, the Santiago network, this is the first time in Asia Pacific. It was held in Bangkok last time, 19 to 22. I think one of the IFRC, Peter, came there. So in that forum, they tried to assess the damage and loss and also the capacity of the governments or the countries to adapt to the climate change. And the term that they are using to assess the country capacity is like the anticipatory action. What is the mitigation, but mostly the anticipatory action, the trigger that they are using to activate their anticipated actions. Those are the terms that they are using in Santiago network. So I think this is a good time for Anticipation Hub to collaborate with the Santiago network, because for them, it's not about the humanitarian aid response, just humanitarian aid response they are focused on, but more on the long-term solution, on long-term sustainability of the adaptation of the countries. And I think this is also what we want to pursue for Anticipation Hub, to make the AA become more sustainable by having a policies, certain budget or financing system or mechanisms, and also a good understanding of the operational guidelines within the countries. And the other things that also quite related to the Anticipatory Action Hub, the Asia Pacific Dialogue, is the heat waves, the discussion about heat waves, because heat waves is quite new for some Asia countries, especially in the Southeast Asia. So I guess this is something also we can bring into the context, because even some countries still I will call like in denial of that heat waves already started, even like the cyclone already started in their country. But it already happens, and it is acknowledged in the Santiago network, and the countries already said that they don't have any experience for the heat waves, so they don't dare, especially for the environmental ministries that were there, they don't dare to acknowledge it publicly that it is a heat wave and how to anticipate the heat waves. So this is also something that Anticipation Hub can support. And I guess the good coordination with Santiago network and other climate change body in the UN can help us to really work faster, or scaling up the anticipatory action better. That's from my side. Over to you, Tim.
Yeah, thank you very much, Margarettha. That was great. And yeah, I think it's fair to say heat waves were very much on the agenda this year. There's a couple of sessions and they were mentioned quite a bit. So that's definitely something that we can pick up in the conversation, I think, later on. So next, I would like to ask Niroj Sapkota from Start Fund Nepal, which was, of course, our host country. So yeah, maybe some local reflections from you as well, Niroj.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tim. And I absolutely concur with everything that has been said so far by our previous colleagues. And namaste, everyone. I hope you're all doing great. And I thank you, Anticipation Hub and Start Network, for the opportunity. And it's a privilege to speak on behalf of Start and also share my personal experiences on the event. This was my first dialogue platform right after the National Dialogue Platform. And I participated in APGP as a moderator in 2 sessions, and we had our colleagues from Start Philippines and Start Bangladesh also facilitating other 3 sessions. Alongside, there were also other sessions and discussions that we participated in. And I found the session overall to be full of energy, excitement, and learning. And like couldn't say for sure what the biggest highlight is because there were too many. But kudos to the organization on the unique style of sessions. For example, no presentations. That was a good idea, I think. Although there were some flaws, but I think it worked out quite well eventually. And also like recalling a few, like the kites and the marketplace, the booth, the themes, and just the overall dazzle of the event was quite unforgettable, I think. And the key takeaways from the session, I would say, is that people definitely want to collaborate, right? And I've realized that just from the session designs, people compromising on the topics to session-related activities and networking, and everything like created a well-bound network of people like working in disaster anticipation, and people were extremely open to conversations. And at the end of the day, I would return home with a full, like a pocket full of visiting cards. And just from the sheer number of people that participated and the diversity, it helped me understand the challenges that they're facing embedding anticipatory action also in their countries. And our team, the Start team, was also sharing what the wider Start network is doing at their respective levels, like through the booth, through the marketplace, and people were actually listening to the conversation because they were also like participating in it, in fact, because they also have a lot of uncertainty in their actions as well, and they were like interested in what other organizations were doing so that they can make sense out of their work. I think it was about making sense out of different organizations' work at this moment. And this like shows that organizations nowadays are more interested in anticipatory action and are seeking answers themselves. And it was also great to see that there is a young leaders platform of Anticipation Hub for young scientists and professionals to enhance like a professional capacity of actors across the globe in anticipatory action. And in terms of the key takeaway, I found the flooding and drought session particularly to be quite informative, and just the approaches taken to anticipate and response to flooding in Nepal was quite interesting for me, because we also at Start for Nepal are trying to seek collaborations to do the same. And despite having a lead time of 6 hours, the presenters showed that we can act anticipatorily, but we have to think outside of the box, right? And such as providing support to the local units on the basis of regional and seasonal forecasts, and also like increasing the capacity to act by setting up early warning systems and pre-position funds ahead of the crisis. And this also helped me like rethink why we need to integrate anticipatory action in the wider preparedness agenda in Start for Nepal as well. And yeah, so if you like ask me what could be next on the next agenda of the APDP, I'll definitely say enough room to collaborate, and maybe also therefore a bigger hall. But definitely platforms such as APDP and the National Dialogue Platform have been critical to the partnership between the Community of Practice and 4-1. Both of these are technical working groups that just today partnered with each other just to, and when also have a joint Skype group now, so that it's also easier to map out what organizations are doing at a continuous level. And maybe we can also make a similar social media group at the global or regional levels as well. Yeah, so this group is also intended to harmonize the trigger mechanisms across the organizations and also eliminate unnecessary redundancies. And as a closing remark, I would say that the session provided personnel and organizational exposure for sure. And I think it's vital that we come together just to discuss these avenues of different organizations and AA and focus on setting up uniform triggers, definitions, and action protocols. Yeah, with that, I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Niroj. That was great. And Niroj mentioned there the razzle dazzle of the meeting in Kathmandu, and I think it's worth acknowledging that an awful lot of this creativity and the ideas come from our final speaker today, and that's Raymond Zingg from IFRC. So Raymond, over to you, and perhaps you'd like to share some reflections from the host perspective.
I hope you can hear me, or maybe see me. Okay, yes. Yeah, no, I mean, I think this year's dialogue platform, the 7th, it was again more and more and more. I hope it was also better in the sense that we had a record number of participants, also a record number of new participants. I think this year was the highest ratio of people who have not joined the dialogue platform or who have been or who are new to anticipatory action. So that was interesting to see. But then also we had another record number of session proposals that we then tried to merge. And I think that was quite nice to see that most, if not all of the sessions were actually co-led by partners. So it was, for example, someone from the UN joining the Red Cross or the START network, or then governments to come together to present a topic. So it was not just highlighting one organization, it was really the joint effort, I think, of the community. And again, I think, as every year, I say that every year, but I think the spirit that we create at these dialogue platforms is quite important. That sense of community that, yes, we are all in it together, not for the worse, but for the better, right? I think it's very important to see, to look outward. I think sometimes we might be too inward focused, right? And say, oh, okay, actually there's more partners in my own country who do this. But not only that, it's also, there is so much going on in Asia, in the Pacific as well now, and of course globally. But to have that kind of awareness and that chance to really talk about that during the 3 days, I think that's always one of the best achievements, and I think I saw that during the platform, when there are these chances where people really make use of that over a coffee or at the marketplace, and then of course also the sessions. I think that has been quite successful this year as well. Yeah, I think well, of course, and also there are the kites, the balloons, and that kind of stuff that hopefully people also remember, in the sense that, okay, that was a bit the connection to the community and the experience factor of it as well. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Raymond. And yeah, as a member of the team that organises the Global Dialogue Platform, it's great to see all the kites and all the creativity that goes on in Asia Pacific, but it does also make it harder for us, because it means we've got to raise our game to match the regional dialogue platforms as well. So it's either motivating or what are we going to do? Great, thank you very much, panelists. Now I'd like to turn to everyone else who's joined us today, and before we move to your own reflections, just in case there's any questions for the panelists themselves, something to clarify from something that they talked about, or perhaps to share a reflection on what we've heard already today. I have a couple myself, but I'll just open the floor to everyone in the room to see if there's any questions for our speakers today. Please feel free to just unmute and ask your question. Okay, well, while people are thinking if they have one, I do have a couple. The technical working standards and the technical standards were mentioned by a couple of our speakers today as something that was a highlight from the meeting in Kathmandu. I just wondered if someone from the technical working group for Asia Pacific could just explain what those are, in case some of the people here today aren't quite sure. So explain how they came about, the recent publication on the technical standards, and also what the plan is to use for them. So maybe one of the people in Bangkok in the room there could just clarify that for us.
Sorry, this was about the technical standards, right? Yes, I mean, the technical working group in Asia Pacific, we came together and said, well, this is actually, it would be important to have some sort of broader guidelines on what anticipatory action means in Asia Pacific, and because we all have our own guidance, right, each organization, but then also sometimes each country then has different interpretations of what anticipatory action is. But it was mainly to provide the broader guidelines, or you could actually think of it more as a label or a sticker, say, yes, this is anticipatory action, this is not anticipatory action, but again, in a very broad sense, right? Just to bring us all together on the same page and say, okay, yes, these are the minimum standards, so to say, that we want to follow, and then you can call it anticipatory action. It is not to somehow supersede or to impose anything on an organization's own methodology, but to guide it and to say, yes, that's what we agree on at the regional level, at least. But maybe, I don't know, over to you as well. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, perhaps to add that this technical standards, it came out of it recently, but as we talked about in the session, it's not just static document. What we want is to have this document as a living document, to update it constantly, I mean, not constantly, on a regular basis, and based on the feedback that we gather from the country actors as well, and perhaps taking advantage of the upcoming national dialogue platforms that we might have in the next months, later this year in Pakistan or Bangladesh. I know that's growing up recently. So yeah, how these technical standards can be actually used by them could be important. Yeah, to keep this product alive, basically.
Thank you both. That was great. And I'll pause again for 10 seconds in case someone else has a question. If not, I will ask my second question, and then we'll move on to the groups. Please do feel free to unmute and to chip in if you'd like to. Okay, then I will go with my second question. Margarettha, you mentioned that governments were impressed, and they welcomed the opportunity to come and learn from others, see what other countries were doing at the Asia Pacific Dialogue Platform. Is that a trend that you see in governments across the whole Asia Pacific region, or are there some countries that you think are still being kind of led by the practitioners, or the governments aren't not quite on board yet? And this could be something for other panelists to share from their own experience as well. Yeah, are we seeing this trend of governments across the region, or is it still quite localized at a national level?
What I can see from what I can sense from the dialogue, like from Mongolia, they are already starting to be in part of it, and then they because for them it's very specialized, like Zoot's response. They are very into it right now. They even have their preparedness and also good early warning systems established as now. So. In general, all these governments actually, they already in some ways already have some parts of the anticipatory actions on place, or at least in their preparedness plan, we can see some of the steps of anticipatory action is there. They already have the early warning systems improve and continuously to improve their early warning systems. The issue is sometimes for the government is what is the uniqueness of the AA compared to the disaster preparedness that they have right now. That's always the questions from the new government that we are approaching. And sometimes they also talk about more on the mitigation part for anticipatory action. When we said that anticipatory action is also part of the mitigation part, they are thinking about like mitigation for the infrastructures, something like that, So I would say government from Southeast Asia, now they are starting to see first, like what are the modalities that they have right now that already in line with anticipatory action, and what kind of things that they need to improve for anticipatory action. And this is where we as the practitioners need to support them, because for us, we are talking about giving the aid before the disaster happens, which is the cash transfers or in-kinds or any activities. Yeah, we are doing after the disasters happen, but now we try to do it before disaster happens to make it to reduce the damage and loss. So this is the thing that we need to give evidence to them, more evidence that this will work better rather than, and the investment will be much more efficient and effective rather than waiting for the disaster really to come. So that is the main, I think that's the main issue for the government, because if they want to make a policy for this anticipatory action, this short window time of anticipatory actions, they need the academic evidence, right? The academic evidence to make sure that their policy is based on the real facts. And this is what we can support with our experience. And I think this is what Anticipation Hub, my understanding from the last meeting, you are trying to get more evidence right now. And then I think as a partner, we can work together to collect this evidence and use it to advocate our governments. I hope I answer your questions.
No, you did. Thank you. Yeah, and yeah, that's very much what the Anticipation Hub is about, or one of the things. Certainly, you know, we are trying to gather the evidence from projects, from the academic research that looks at anticipatory action, because this is what we understand a lot of governments have said is, you know, we like the idea, but you know, we need evidence that this works before we commit to it, because it's quite a shift for some countries, I guess, or for some people to move from disaster response to anticipating disasters. So people really want that evidence of, you know, how does it work? How does it benefit people more? What are the major, you know, advantages of shifting to this session? And one of the reasons that the dialogue platforms are so important, I think, is people come together with that evidence. You know, they can share and reflect with each other. You know, they'll bring the lessons from their projects. If you wait till everything's documented and reported and peer reviewed and what have you, that can take quite a long time. But especially when there's governments in the room, they've got a chance to ask questions. You know, they've got a chance to talk to the people who are actually doing this work on the ground. So it is a really important thing, I think, that not just that there's interaction and collaboration from getting everyone together in these countries and in these dialogue platforms, but there's also, you know, first-hand experiences are being shared. It's, you know, that is also a form of evidence. People say, well, we tried this and this worked, or, you know, the heatwave sessions that Verena and her colleagues organized. I was in that one, and it's like, this is what it looks like. You know, it's evidence not just of the impacts, but, you know, this is what it looks like in practice. I think it was a gentleman from Vietnam. He bought a model of a cooling shelter to say, this is what we put up in the street. You know, this is anticipatory action. You know, we're doing this right now. And I think that, you know, being able to see that and hear from the people who are on the ground and doing this work is a really valuable feature of the dialogue platforms. Great. So sorry, go on.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, and if I may add, when the government, like the Ministry of Environment, actually already have for early warning systems like the farmer schools, you know, who can help the farmers to understand the early warning signs for their what to do after they receive the early warning signs. So sometimes there is other departments in the government that already work for the early warning, early actions, beyond the disaster management agencies. So I think this is something that we need also to identify what kind of government. Even my understanding, even Ministry of Education, they have the safe schools, and yeah, the other departments also have the transportation department also have their own mitigation or anticipation actions. That's what I heard during the Santiago network. So I think it's good if we can identify more who are the ministry or departments that are actually related to the anticipation hub, and actually identify what kind of anticipatory action they have. So we don't say that the government is zero in the AA, but they do have the modality. And now we just need to improve to go to one step. So I think that's better for government, because they don't really need to have a new term, but just improve whatever they have already. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Margaretha. Right, so we're going to now move on to everyone's views. The clue is in the name, it's a conversation. So what I'd like to suggest is, if you're comfortable with it, then maybe just turn on your camera, and then we can see everyone who's here in the meeting. If you don't want to, absolutely fine. And then I would just ask everyone in the room to sort of, if you'd like to reflect on something that you discovered at the meeting itself in Kathmandu, or if you weren't in Kathmandu, something that you would like to contribute from your own country, from your own projects, from your own experience. And I know there's a little hand raised Zoom button, but sometimes it's hard to keep on. So I think if you'd like to speak, please just can put your hand up as an actual hand and just unmute, and please just come and join the conversation and share your own reflections on the Asia Pacific Dialogue Platform, and also the theme, which is reaching new heights. You know, how do we make anticipatory action in Asia Pacific grow sustainably? Anything like that, please just unmute, turn your camera on and share your reflections.
Hi, this is Sami. I'm from the Afghanistan Humanitarian Hub. Is there anyone from the START network at this meeting today? Just wondering.
Yes, I am from START network. I'm from START Fund Nepal, though. Not
Yeah,
at the global level, but
great.
yeah.
So I'm START Network Afghanistan. Nice to see someone from the START network. We just came from the Hub Connect from Nairobi, Kenya, and I think we as a hub trying to establish the anticipatory humanitarian action in Afghanistan, and also trying to learn the art and skills of predicting disasters and pre-positioning resources in order to mitigate the risk. I'm glad to be part of this meeting. So yeah, and I was wondering if this platform for Asia has something to do with predicting human-made risks and disasters, for example, IDPs. So anyone in this call interested in creating an early warning or predicting, anticipating violence-related IDPs or economic IDPs in Afghanistan, I would love to pick up a conversation on how we can build and reinforce the system that we already have in Afghanistan. Yeah.
Thank you, Samuela. Anyone want to reflect? I mean, I know from the Anticipation Hub launched earlier this year the Global Overview Report. And one of the themes that came up when we were collecting the data about what's going on around the world is that there is a change, I think it's fair to say, or maybe a shift, or perhaps even an expansion in terms of anticipatory action, that is no longer just looking at climate-related hazards or hydrometeorological hazards. It's expanding to other non-weather related hazards. One of those that did come up, I think mostly in terms of projects under development or frameworks under development, is conflict and violence and also displacement. There was also a project, I think, that looks at economic crises based in Sri Lanka. So while I can't answer specifically on Afghanistan, looking at internally displaced persons and migration as a hazard that can be anticipated, there's certainly work going on about that. Whether it came up in Asia Pacific, I don't know. Perhaps someone else could reflect on that, or say, was that a theme in any of the sessions? I didn't manage to see all of them.
Yeah, I think there were some sessions actually at the platform on that, but more in terms of how to do anticipation in a conflict setting. So I think that's normally the distinction, right? Can we anticipate conflict? So that would be AA for conflict, and then AA in a conflict setting. Yeah, that was addressed. I can look up this session. I think it was.
Yeah, I was part of the session,
sorry,
actually,
right.
and we do have an Afghanistan example, not predicting the conflict, but doing drought anticipatory action, implementing drought anticipatory action in a protracted crisis setting. So during the 2020, the later half of 2020, when La Nina was at play, and drought was sort of predicted, and FAO activated our drought and dispatch action protocol. But Afghanistan, of course, is a complex environment, and at the time, 2021, the political leadership changeover also happened, and that sort of course, influenced our actions, as it turned out from the impact evaluation, as well as the evaluation, sort of the impact assessment process itself, because of the sort of the limited accessibility to the target areas, as well as we couldn't talk to female beneficiaries in the areas as well. So there are lessons learned from this activation, and as a matter of fact, the impact analysis from the intervention would soon come out in the next coming weeks, hopefully. So we can definitely share that information with you later as well. And in terms of anticipating conflict, that's something that we need to sort of collect more evidence on, and more consensus, or should come out of, like, which indicators that we should look at, but also some ethical considerations as well, and how anticipatory actions sort of interact with these conflict settings and displacement, and so on. But I think one more example that I can think of is also in the Philippines in 2019, in Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, when we activated drought anticipatory action as well. That was also during that was El Nino year in 2018-19. And at the time it was definitely mixture of, the drought, sort of dry spell at play, but then also the conflict and displacement setting in the mixture as well. But this impact analysis is certainly available, and I'm sure that some of the lessons learned from this intervention can be also useful for Afghanistan's considerations as well. So I can drop it in the chat, those information. So for everyone to look at. Thanks.
Sounds great. Thank you, Inyoung. And there was also a community conversation on internally displaced persons. Last year we held, I think it was focused on Bangladesh rather than Afghanistan, but there's a recording of that on YouTube. I haven't put the link in because I'm a bit nervous about opening up a YouTube video on my screen and then it kind of like somehow taking over the meeting, but I will drop it in the chat and send it to you later. We have a second question in the chat from GritH-CBM International, which I'm guessing is an organization rather than a person, but perhaps you'd like to unmute and introduce yourself and then ask your question about El Nino, because I think it's very pertinent.
Yes, hello. My name is Grit. I'm sitting in Germany for Christopher Blind Mission, and I have a question concerning the upcoming El Niño's predicted and already happening season, and if there were any talks about the impact of this, also looking at last year's flooding from Pakistan, and people are still kind of working around the effects of what happened there, but then you have El Nino coming, so you should be anticipating effects of this as well, and not only in Pakistan context, but other Asian contexts as well. So I was wondering if there were any discussions on how to marry also these two situations, that you have the fallout from former happenings, and then on top of it, you have already the anticipated coming of effects from El Nino. Not sure if my question was clear enough.
No, I think so. I think it's would someone that was there like to reflect? Did El Nino come up in the panel discussions or some of the side sessions?
Perhaps I can add a few words. Yes, definitely. From the models that we currently look at, one of it being Bureau of Meteorology from Australia, we are on El Nino alert, meaning that there are high chance of El Nino this year, with impact perhaps materializing from later part of this year. Now, the impact of El Nino, we can't say that it's same every year. There's big El Nino, strong El Nino, but then also how that impacts on the ground can be different country by country and year by year as well. But we are, in FAO, we're definitely keeping a close eye on how El Nino would impact the countries on the ground in Southeast Asia and South Asia. You mentioned Pakistan as well. Pakistan is a little bit complicated in a sense that we might observe potentially drier conditions, but in some parts, but then also wetter conditions in the southern part as well. So as you mentioned, this impact of 2022 flood is still, we could say ongoing. It's definitely affected most vulnerable populations, and so our monitoring of El Nino situation and how our intervention for this potential impact could target those populations that have already impacted by floods, and how anticipatory action sort of ahead of this potential drought or flood can safeguard them, making sure that they are not as impacted, and how we can reduce that with anticipatory action, if that makes sense. But to sum up, yes, we are closely monitoring the El Nino situation. It's definitely part of the indicators that we look at for anticipatory action. I don't know if Raymond, you have something to add, but yeah. I don't know if that answered your question.
Thank you very much, Inyoung. Okay, so we've just got just under 10 minutes left. So I'd like to turn to the other part of the questions that we put in the chat for participants. And again, floor is open for people to share their reflections. So the theme for this year's Asia Pacific Dialogue Platform, both the in-person meeting in Kathmandu and the online sessions that we're continuing with now, is about how we ensure that the growth of this approach in the Asia Pacific region is sustainable. I think some of our panelists touched on it earlier, talking about governments and making sure that the policies are in place to make sure that the funding is in place, that it grows at a pace that can be kept going. But is there anything that the people gathered here today would like to suggest hasn't been mentioned yet? Anything that will help to ensure that anticipatory action scales up in a sustainable manner that we haven't touched on yet, or possibly you felt wasn't reflected in the discussions in Kathmandu? Anything at all? So please feel free to ask. Possibly we covered it all, and that's the the key elements with the technical standards and with more government involvement. So yeah, it could be that we're on the right path. So we've just got a few more minutes. We can open the floor completely. Any final reflections at all from anyone on the 3-day meeting or anticipatory action in Asia Pacific? How you see it progressing in the coming months and years as we move towards a sustainable path? Please just unmute and you can chip in.
Yeah, maybe for me, it's good for the next step also to include, if we want really the government to take charge for anticipatory action, to also include the finance ministry or finance department, because we are talking about the pillar 3 or the block 3, the financing systems, because I think that's the most fearful things for the government if they need to disburse cash or disburse funding for before the disaster happens, and what is the consequences. So I think the finance government, the finance ministry is also needs to be there, and also the private sectors, because private sectors also have some kind of interest, right, in the early warning systems, like the insurance, but also like the industry, because with especially the agricultural industry, for instance, because with the early warning, actually they can help mitigate to reduce the damage and loss. That's one thing. The other things, it seems that in the UN itself, there are different terms of the disasters. And it was interesting to know that they also discuss about the long-term disaster, like the increasing temperature, sea level rising, etc., which is more on the environmental degradations, deforestations, and land degradation, something like that, which may be also a good thing for us to start seeing that because they're also starting to see what is the anticipatory action for these long-term disasters. And I think that's also something that we can see, we can start to explore. So we have kind of like alignment with the government, especially in the Ministry of Environment. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Margarettha. So I think we can wrap up there, because we're reaching the end of the hour. And just to respond to one of the questions in the chat, this year we're trying out a new hybrid format. So the meetings in Kathmandu, the sessions weren't recorded as they have been in the past, just the opening and closing ceremonies, and I think one of the plenaries. So we'll be putting those on YouTube, on our dedicated YouTube channel fairly shortly. They will be made available to watch. But some of the sessions and some of the discussions that took place during the 3 days will be continued online. As everyone knows, you know, in the post-COVID world, we're trying to find ways to make sure that we can combine in-person and online interaction with the community and sort of capitalize on the advantages of both. And so this is a new approach. It was, you know, pre-decided that we would trial this with the Asia Pacific Dialogue platform. The online part will be coming in the next few weeks. We'll be making announcements there about when those sessions will take place, what format they will take place, and you know, providing dates. They will all go on the Anticipation Hub, and we'll be sharing those on social media and our other communications channels, so the newsletter and on the website itself. So yeah, please do look out for those if you'd like to contribute more. And yeah, we will be announcing those soon. But for today, I'd like to thank our panelists again who spoke. So Margarettha, Raymond, Inyoung, Niroj, and Verena, thank you very much for your time and sharing your reflections. Thank you to everyone from the audience who shared their own reflections as well. We'll be posting a short news article soon about the Asia Pacific Dialogue platform in Nepal and the online meetings as well. So look out for that as well. So yeah, thank you all very much for your time. And the next conversation will be on El Nino as well, the next community conversation. It's, again, in the planning at the moment. We're working with the Red Cross, Red Crescent Climate Centre on that. But yeah, the next conversation will be on that. So if that's the theme you're interested in, please do join that and yeah, share your thoughts, particularly from the Asia Pacific region at that. And yeah, further announcements to come. So thanks everyone once again for your time. And yeah, we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you too. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.